On this day in 1999, NATO bombed Serbia's public broadcaster, Radio Television Serbia. NATO justified the attack by saying RTS was a part of Slobodan Milosevic's war propaganda, which is why they killed 16 workers, a makeup artist, technicians, artists, and security staff. Was this a legitimate military target or a war crime Serbia bombed in the first place? The US wanted Serbia to give up its southern province of Kosovo, where guerrilla groups were waging a war of secession. US envoy to Yugoslavia, Richard Holbrooke, made it clear to Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic what would happen if Milosevic failed to accept the Americans' offer.
I sat in that big room in the palace, and I said to him, "You understand that if our delegation leaves here today and you haven't changed your position, that the consequence will be the beginning within a few hours of a very swift, severe, and sustained aerial attack by NATO forces."
American diplomacy. And while much of the West was convinced by their propaganda machine that bombing Serbia was the only way to stop the Serbian counterinsurgency in Kosovo, the bombing of the national TV station polarized public opinion. A report by Amnesty International said NATO had violated international law by targeting areas where civilians were certain to be killed, and added that the bombing of the RTS building, quote, was a deliberate attack on a civilian object and as such constitutes a war crime, end quote. Noam Chomsky called the bombing of RTS an act of terrorism. NATO commander Wesley Clark tried to downplay what they had done.
There were actually 6 people who were killed, as I recall. I recall 6.
Yeah, I was there at the time, and I know the families.
I mean, think about it. This wasn't an attack on some TV tower in the middle of nowhere with nobody working there. This was the bombing of the state television headquarters in a heavily populated urban area in Serbia's capital, Belgrade. The killing of innocent people who were working the night shift. If that's not a war crime, what is? Clearly, the goal was to instigate terror, because RTS resumed its programming less than 24 hours later from a secret location. But can you imagine what it was like for the people working there, knowing what had happened to their colleagues, knowing they might be next? Isn't that the goal of terrorism? And this wasn't a one-off thing. Many people don't know that the state television building in the major Serbian city of Novi Sad was also hit by NATO on May 3rd, 1999. The bombing happened on World Press Freedom Day, and that TV building was bombed a whopping 5 times. Nobody was held accountable for the attack, but it reminds us of the alternative to press freedom in the modern world, the right of everyone to hear a different opinion. Before it was bombed, RTS allowed foreign journalists to report from RTS's studios. Some of those foreign journalists supported the bombing. NATO didn't give RTS the right to disagree with the bombing of their own country. I say we hear everyone and decide for ourselves.